If our eyes were more sensitive to the different wavelengths of light, we would be able to see that everything is radiating electromagnetic light waves continuously. This forms a great dance of energy exchange, forming a process of spontaneous and continuous change that we see and feel as the aging process and as the flow of time itself. I am on YouTube promoting my theory on the physics of time as a physical process. This video explains why electric charge comes in two types, positive and negative, and why charge of the same type repels and opposite charge attracts. It does this by explaining time as an interactive process that is non-linear, with a timeline or arrow of time for each reference frame. This theory is based on just two postulates. The first is that the quantum wave particle function, or probability function, of quantum mechanics represents the forward passage of time itself, photon by photon. The second is that Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, that is formed by the wave function, is the same uncertainty we have with any future event within our own reference frame that we can interact with, turning the possible into the actual. The photon is the carrier of the electromagnetic force, and therefore forms the flow of electric charge and the movement of electromagnetic fields. In this theory, this forms what we see and feel as the flow of time. Therefore, this theory should be able to explain why like charge repels and unlike charge attracts, giving us an objective understanding to the electromagnetic force. Modern physics has no deep explanation of the nature of charge, but in this theory, positive and negative charge is merely a deficiency of the other within the same physical process. The deficiency is a difference in the rate that time flows within an individual reference frame or system, and the physical process is time itself, as a process of continuous energy exchange, or what I like to call continuous gradation, forming the continuum of time. Like charge represents the charge for the whole surface of a quantum wave particle function or probability function, expanding out within an individual reference frame. Therefore, like charge repels as the wave function expands, forming the flow of time. Unlike charge represents two quantum wave particle functions or probability functions, expanding out from their reference frames and coming into contact. Therefore, unlike charge attracts and keeps continuously cancelling out as the future unfolds. The reason why there are only two types of charge, when there is an infinite number of quantum wave particle functions or probability functions, is because of the nature of time. In this theory, time is formed by the energy of an object flowing up the rate that time flows. Therefore, there will only ever be two ratios, positive and negative, representing the greater or lesser time dilation, or rate that time is unfolding, within an individual reference frame. This makes sense when you think that elementary charge can be spread over a finite volume whose absolute size may range from that of everyday objects up to a star or even a large region of interstellar space. Also, a collection of more than two charges gives the potential energy of a system as a whole. In this theory, the potential energy represents the future potential that we all have within our own reference frame, because the process represents the flow of time itself. The precise definition of the difference in potential energy between two configurations or reference frames is as follows. It is the work done by a force external to the system, solely in changing it from one configuration to the other. This gives us a totally objective understanding to the electromagnetic force. We have to do work by putting energy into something to create the potential of our own future within that reference frame. This makes even more sense because in Maxwell's theory of magnetic fields, any moving charged particle creates a magnetic moment. Because positive and negative charge is an innate part of matter that keeps cancelling out, this process is universal and continuous, forming the continuum of time, moment by moment. It is time variations within magnetic fields that act as a source for electric fields, and time-varying electric fields is the source of the magnetic fields. When one field is changing in time, then a field of the other is induced. This will be relative to the position and momentum of the object creating the time variations, the atoms themselves interacting with the electromagnetic waves. Therefore we have new photon energy coming into existence relative to the position of the atoms, forming what we see and feel as the flow of time. The greater the energy in space, the greater the curvature of space-time, and the stronger the electromagnetic field is at that point in space and at that moment in time. In this theory, the universe is in a process of continuous creation, and therefore electromagnetic waves do not need a propagation medium, because each new photon is a new moment of creation, a new moment in time that changes the curvature of space-time as the future unfolds. This is possible because in Einstein's relativity, every object has its own reference frame. When the object moves, space-time moves relative to the energy, mass, and momentum of the object. Therefore, every object is always in the center of their own created reference frame. This is a universal process, from the largest planet spinning around a star to the smallest living cells. Everything forms its own reference frame by slowing down the rate that time flows, relative to its own energy, mass, and momentum. Just by walking across the room, you will slightly alter your own experience of time and space, and in doing so, you will create your own future, relative to your own actions, or energy, mass, and momentum, forming your own arrow of time within your own created reference frame. Because this process is universal, conscious energy, in the form of electrical activity in the brain, is the most advanced part of this universal process. The continuous flow of ideas and emotions that form consciousness are always in the moment of now, within their own created reference frame. It is this process of each one of us having our own individual reference frame that gives the brain the concept of mind, with each one of us having our own unique view of life. All we need now is an explanation for the uncertainty of life, and for this we have to look at the physics of quantum mechanics. In this theory, the quantum of quantum mechanics is a unit of energy that we see and feel as the flow of time itself. Time is continuously being formed, photon by photon, by the spontaneous absorption and emission of light waves of electromagnetic radiation, a process of continuous change, continuous energy exchange, forming the future uncertainty of everyday life. This uncertainty can be seen mathematically as Heisenberg's uncertainty principle of quantum physics. This might sound mad, but the probability function that forms the uncertainty principle also forms the movement of electric charge, forming the flow of electric current with electrical potential. In this theory, electrical potential and the individual's future potential are the same within their own reference frame. The most advanced part of this universal process is in the form of electrical activity in the brain, being able to comprehend and measure this process as the flow of time with a past and uncertain future. This process is totally universal and interactive, from the largest object to the smallest creature, right down to the smallest element of the periodic table, will slow the rate that time flows, forming a curvature of space-time relative to its own energy or mass. In this theory, gravity is a secondary force to the electromagnetic force. Objects just free fall towards the greatest mass or energy because it has the slowest rate that time flows. The second law of thermodynamics falls out of this theory. The organization for the spontaneous disorganization of entropy is formed by the spherical symmetry of the quantum wave particle function. The spontaneous absorption and emission of light forms the flow of time, with photon energy cascading down, forming greater degrees of freedom for the flow of entropy. We have an infinite number of reference frames within our universe, and because light has momentum, and momentum is frame dependent, each object or observer will have their own reference frame with their own future uncertainty as time unfolds, photon by photon. Therefore an observer can look back in time at the beauty of the stars in all directions from the center of their own reference frame. This is because they are forming their own space-time by collapsing the waves of light into new photon oscillations, forming their own future potential. An artist will take energy and time to create a work of art, because the atoms of the hand and eye have bonded together, forming the movement of electric charge, creating their own potential future. Creation is truly in the hand and eye of the beholder in this theory. This video will put forward the idea that only an infinity of possibilities could form the diversity and complexity of life. This theory is based on the mathematics and physics of some of the greatest minds the world has ever seen. It will explain a universal process of energy exchange, formed photon by photon at the quantum level of the atoms, by the wave-particle duality of light. It forms a dynamic process of spherical symmetry forming and breaking. This spherical geometry can be seen as 4 pi in the equations of quantum mechanics. When this symmetry is broken, it forms spiral symmetry, forming the Fibonacci ratio that we see almost everywhere in nature. This is not because of economy of growth, but because it represents a universal dynamic geometry. In this theory, the Planck constant is a constant of action and is continuously coming into existence, photon by photon, or moment by moment. This is part of a continuous process of change or creation. Therefore we have a true infinity that can continuously be halved or divided over a period of time. A mathematician will be able to divide any number into infinitely smaller parts because of this process. For a poet or artist, this process continuously forms a blank canvas that they can interact with, forming the possible into the actual as time unfolds. Our deepest understanding of time is explained in Einstein's theories of relativity. In these theories, time is more than just a measure of change, of things happening, because we have the geometry of Einstein's curvature of spacetime. The theory explained in this video extends the theory of relativity to everyday objects and life forms. Living things will form their own future by slowing down the rate that time flows relative to their own energy. In this way, they form a vortex in space, formed by the rate that time flows, and are therefore always at the center of their own reference frame. It is because life can choose when and where to collapse the quantum wave particle function or probability function, breaking the symmetry, that we have free will. Life will create its own ripples in the fabric of space-time, forming its own broken symmetry of its own evolutionary path. This forms an infinity of possibilities within the evolutionary process for each life form. In this theory, all life has a common geometry, formed by the geometry of space-time. This forms a mathematical base for Charles Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection. Therefore the diversity of life is not based just on the survival of the fittest, but on a self-created beauty for its own sake. The uniqueness of every life form, of every sunset, of every moment, can only be created out of a potential infinity of possibilities. Because it is an infinity, everything is unique, and our whole universe is only relative to each individual object or observer. We have a universal dynamically forming geometry, forming symmetry from simple dynamics. The forward momentum of electromagnetic radiation will place light-charged particles that repel, becoming equally placed along the curvature of their own created space-time. The same broken symmetry can be seen in each individual part of a plant, from the position of the leaves to the petals and seeds upon the flower head. Each new cell growth will have its own unique angle, forming the curvature of space-time. Therefore we see the same patterns in plant life as we do in deep space, formed by the same universal geometry. It is this dynamic universal geometry that human mathematics is based upon. In this theory, fractals are formed by the repetition of the wave function, continuously collapsing and reforming, a kind of geometrical and mathematical repetition. This has gauge symmetry, and we can re-gauge each new photon at 0, representing a new moment in time, the moment of now, with the positive numbers marching off towards an infinite future, their negative numbers receding towards a limitless past, the positive and negative of electromagnetic waves. This gives us a deeper understanding of time and a reason why we have a future and a past. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared is the most famous equation in physics. But could this equation give us an objective understanding of the universe? All we have to do is place the Lorentz contraction of space and time between the energy and mass. Therefore, the greater the energy, the greater the contraction of space, and the slower time will run. Mass will increase relative to this, and each reference frame can be seen as a vortex in space and time. The C2 in the equation represents light radiating out in all directions at a constant speed, forming a sphere of electromagnetic radiation from its radius, forming a square of probability. This is the same probability we have with any future event, because the process forms the flow of time itself, photon by photon. The brackets represent the boundary condition of the reference frame, formed by the energy, and the infinity symbol represents an infinite number of reference frames that make up our universe. In this way, we link the time dilation of Einstein's theories on relativity with a deeper understanding of quantum mechanics to give us an objective understanding of our universe that fits in with the reality of our everyday life.